Hello again. This is the 21st of September 2020. One of my friends sent me a rather interesting clip. It's the Still Report. Title, Trump's Supreme Pick Must Be Seated Before November the 3rd. The clip's about 9 minutes in duration. Let's have a listen.
Good evening. I'm still reporting on the coup. Well, the hoax buttons have come in. We only have about 80 left, and they're $5 a piece, which include shipping and handling. They have a little billstill.com at the bottom, and that's where you go to get yours before they're all gone. Now, the desperados huddling back in their box canyon are running out of time and running out of novel exploits before Election Day, especially now that there will be a new Supreme Court justice seated before the election. And here is why the Republicans in the Senate must seat Trump's nominee before the election. The desperados have been working on a master plan to defeat Trump for several years that they thought was unbeatable. The big, bold push for mail-in ballots nationwide. It had worked great in California in 2016, where Clinton beat Trump by an astounding 4+ million votes. Little did we know in 2016 that the Dems were handing out ballots like candy at Halloween, then harvesting them, which means going out to collect them completely out of the normal channels provided by each county's fairly reliable electoral system. Well, that had worked so well in 2016 that they decided to go for it and try to make this a nationwide effort. The thing is, the mail-in ballot scheme is so fraught with opportunities for massive cheating that unless some lawsuit somewhere is able to stop it, this will not be a friendly ending to this election race. It is a nightmare for long-time election officials at the county level. It is their primary responsibility to secure the voting process, to be sure the vote is honest. Already the lawsuits are flying, and this is pushing election officials in Pennsylvania to quit rather than be blamed for what will be a litigation catastrophe the day after November 3rd. This morning, True the Vote founder Catherine Engelbrecht was on Fox and explained.
Mail-in ballot laws in Pennsylvania, there's a new one out there, and it's driven out nearly a quarter of the state's top election officials. Why is that happening?
The pressure that is being put on these election administrators at this point is overwhelming. You've got them being pummeled with lawsuits that are changing the dynamics of what has to go on these ballots that are now having to be printed and reprinted. They don't have the resources to do it. They're working 15, 16, 17 hours a day with not great wages, and they're sick of it. This is the dirty underbelly that no one's talking about as it relates to mail-in ballots. This is the problem. States and counties are not prepared to deal with what's happening. It's just process. You can't do it. And it's going to get worse. And that's why we're encouraging citizens to get engaged with their counties and help, because it is all hands on deck time.
Yeah, and this is the concern that has repeatedly popped up. When you look at that particular state, primary results took weeks to report in June. So when we talk about the question of whether people will have election results that night and what it will mean if they do not have results that night or soon after, that is a significant discussion that needs to be addressed. Thank you for being here today and weighing in. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
This is going to be way worse than the 2000 election in Florida, where it took a decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, the famous Bush versus Gore case, which ruled that George W. Bush had won Florida, thereby giving him a one-vote win in the Electoral College. That decision took until December 12, 2000, over a month after the election. Now the entire desperado coup plot hinges on their last major exploit, the mail-in ballot election fraud. Dozens of lawsuits will start flying Election Day, November 3rd, hundreds more on November 4th, the day after. Trump will apparently have won an overwhelming Electoral College victory at the polls, except for one thing: validating and counting the millions of mail-in ballots. And these mail-in ballots are not secured by voter ID at the polls. They will be the shakiest presidential ballots cast in American history. The mail-in ballot concept is an open door for stuffing the ballot boxes after the end of Election Day. Ballot box stuffing is nothing new, but it's never been this easy. I remember election night, November 8, 1960. Senator John F. Kennedy was running against President Dwight D. Eisenhower's Vice President, Richard Nixon. Even after California had reported, still, Cook County and Chicago had not reported. I forget which network, but one of the political experts speculated that Mayor Daley of Chicago may be holding out the Chicago vote to see how many votes Kennedy needed to win the state. Kennedy needed both Texas and Illinois to win. Kennedy defeated Nixon by 46,000 votes in Texas. Although election fraud was alleged by no less than Republican Senators Everett Dirksen and Barry Goldwater, Kennedy's running mate was Texas Senator Lyndon Johnson, who also had a legendary political machine. Late into the night, we awaited the Chicago vote. In the end, Kennedy won Illinois by 9,000 votes out of 4.75 million cast. Nixon did not formally concede until the afternoon of the day after the election, but the Republican National Committee continued its challenges for more than a month. The Chicago Tribune wrote that the election of November 8th was characterized by such gross and palpable fraud as to justify the conclusion that Nixon was deprived of victory. So, back to the 2000 election. Again, the Bush-Gore election was decided by a single vote in the Electoral College after a Democrat Florida Supreme Court had ordered a recount. The U.S. Supreme Court, however, overruled them, or else Al Gore would have been the president, not G.W. Bush. I predict that there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of lawsuits filed this year, and several of them will make it to the Supreme Court for a decision that may be the deciding factor in whether Donald Trump will gain re-election or whether Democrats will have to give Sleepy Joe yet another few pep pills in order for him to read a short acceptance speech weeks after the voting was supposedly concluded. And that, my friends, is what neither side is talking about, but it is certainly the 800-pound gorilla hiding in the other room. And this is the real reason the Republicans will try to ram through the Supreme Court nominee with unmatched speed, because the new justice will be the decider of this 2020 presidential race in any of a dozen cases before the Supreme Court, all on an emergency basis, and upon which the fate of whether this nation is plunged into perpetual domination and loss of most of our treasured individual freedoms, or a second Trump term brings about safety and prosperity. The only way to avoid all of this is if Americans flood to the polls in sufficient numbers for Trump, and that makes it impossible for the desperados to overcome.
All right, so you heard what Bill Still had to say, and you sure as heck heard what I have to say. I have no doubt that Trump will seat someone on the Supreme Court prior to the November 3rd election. And the Democrats are gonna go off their gourd. But hey, it is what it is. Wasn't it Obama that made a similar comment about elections? You know? I mean, you gotta sort of accept whatever's thrown at you. You might want to repost this and pass it along to your like-minded friends and ask them to do the same. And thanks for listening.